Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is our second virtual financial inclusion information exchange hosted by the Impact Facility. And today we have David Sturms and Candace both joining us, along with some experts in the field. So I'm going to go ahead and let them get started. If you have any comments, you can use the chat, and I think they will, whenever they're ready for engagement, you should be able to unmute yourselves, but you can also just let me know if you're having any issues with that, and we will go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Mona, and thank you everybody for joining us today for this 2-hour workshop. We're really excited about that. Before we get started, in case you haven't selected an audio channel yet, this was now pointed out a few times, but please click on the globe button at the bottom of your screen, and you can select between English, French, and Spanish translation. We will have presentations in different languages, so please select the one you're most comfortable with. Just a general note for this workshop: to avoid background noise, kindly stay off your microphone and stay muted. If and when you have questions, especially during the Q&A, we welcome for people to unmute. And ideally, you raise your hand first when we get there, and then we'll ask you to contribute. You can also use the chat box throughout the presentations. If you have questions for clarification, kindly use the chat box to just park them there. And then in terms of structure, we'll have 4 presentations. Each of those is lasting about 20 minutes. And at the end of each presentation, we'll allow a few questions for clarification. And then this should leave us with at least 20 to 30 minutes of an interactive discussion at the end. So kindly leave your big questions to the end of the discussion. But if there's anything immediate, anything you didn't understand, feel free to ask them right after the presentations of our individual presenters. And as you might have heard already, this session is being recorded. So just be aware that if you're contributing and then coming on camera or microphone, that this will be part of the recording that ends up on the planetGOLD website. And happy for you to take notes, but you'll all receive a meeting summary in the coming days. So everybody that has signed up for today's session will receive a link to the recording as well as a summary of the session. And with this, briefly introducing myself, for those who are not familiar with me, my name is David Sturmes. I'm the co-founder and director of partnerships at the Impact Facility. And I'm joined by my colleague, Candace Jumwa, who helped prepare for this workshop and will help facilitate some of the Q&A at the end of the session. And I'm really excited to welcome today 4 fantastic speakers from Tanzania, Burkina Faso, Colombia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, who are pioneers in engaging with the artisanal small-scale mining sector by trying to provide financial services and products to a community that is often overlooked and misunderstood, especially by the finance sector. We'll do a quick introduction of each speaker before their presentation, but we are joined today on behalf of National Bank of Commerce from Tanzania by Jonathan Bitababaje. We have our colleague from Burkina Faso representing Chorus Bank International, Vincent Konate. We're being joined from Colombia by a representative of CFA, Juan Fernando. And calling in on behalf of Trust Merchant Bank is David McEnvoy, with Trust Merchant Bank's focus being on the DRC. And really a point of encouragement before we dive into it: post your questions, engage. This session is supposed to increase learning and an exchange between actors, while I'm really excited about the experiences and insights shared by our panelists. There's many people on this call that have something valuable to contribute, so we are looking forward to also hearing from you. during the Q&A session at the second half of this meeting. A brief framing around this. Mona has already said that this is the second of, in total, 3 webinars or online workshops that we get to host on behalf of planetGOLD. This is leveraging work that we've done for planetGOLD over the last year in partnership with the Alliance for Responsible Mining, where we've been privileged to engage with financial inclusion programs across South America and Africa and Asia. And these have been documented through case studies, across programmatic analysis, and an issue brief, which we are happy to also reference in the follow-up email. But a link to that is here at the bottom of the screen. You can find it on the planetGOLD website to learn much more about some of today's presenters, but also other projects that are trying to drive the financial inclusion of artisanal small-scale gold miners. Why is this important? planetGOLD obviously is anchored in the desire to eradicate mercury from artisanal small-scale gold mining, which requires a pivot from very rudimentary processing to more mechanized processing, and that in itself is capital intensive. But beyond the usage of mercury, ASGM is a hugely important livelihood across Africa, South America, and Asia. The gold mining sector is estimated to provide employment to 8 million people. And based on current market pricing, assuming that 20% of gold that is mined gold originates from ASGM, we're talking about more than $50 billion that this sector is producing in terms of economic value. And that while being largely excluded from the provision of formal financial services. But it's not for a lack of goodwill on the side of the banks that is happening. The artisanal small-scale gold mining sector and artisanal mining sector at large is perceived as incredibly risky. It's an informal sector where there's not a lot of data to inform decisions around financial service provision. And then on top of that, putting the money aside, there's big ESG concerns around the sector. Ironically, or from a chicken and egg perspective, in order to address these ESG concerns, people need to get access to financing, to move from artisanal to small-scale mining, to adopt better and more responsible practices. But the private sector isn't a development actor first and foremost, and so it's difficult to expect banks to foot the bill for growing and formalizing a sector that is in dire need of investment. Because of that, and understanding that across countries where planetGOLD is active, and we've got many participants from countries where planetGOLD is not yet active, as well on the line, we wanted to talk to the organizations and the formal financial organizations and banks specifically that have already gathered experience with engaging with this sector. Throughout the 4 presentations that will follow, we will hear about the due diligence process that the banks have adopted, trying to engage with the ASGM sector. We'll hear reflections on the legal requirements and the legal framework that they operate in their national contexts, which is really important when we reflect on scalability to other geographies. And throughout the presentations and the Q&A, we want to explore in how far loan products and other financial services need to be adjusted to artisanal small-scale mining, or whether they are largely the same as other SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprise loans banks would usually provide. Some of the projects we work with had partnered with other organizations or were able to draw and invest on capital that helped them de-risk their investments. So that's crucial if we want to build a pipeline and develop an appetite for investment into the sector. And insofar that these projects are already implementing their work, we'll hear on how it's going and what experiences they've gathered to date from the loans and the products and services that they've provided so far. And access to finance starts with access to banking, as we will hear from many of the presenters. it starts with having a bank account and starts with transacting before being able to access loans and other products. And so having engaged with all of these speakers before and learned about their projects, I'm really excited for the ones that hear about this for the first time. And with this, happy to go to our first presentation of Jonathan, calling in from Dar es Salaam on behalf of the National Bank of Commerce. Jonathan, if you don't mind turning your camera on and unmuting, we'd like to hand over to you. And thank you so much for joining, Jonathan. Jonathan has been working in the banking sector for 15 years. He holds a master's degree in business administration and has focused on SME engagement and relationship building with SMEs and building out the portfolio of NBC with the SME sector. And quite recently, they have ventured into the ASDM sector and done so in partnership with a local NGO called FADEF. And Jonathan, once again, thanks for joining. I'll hand over to you. And kindly let us know if we should go to the next slide, and then we will do so.
Hi, David and everyone. If you can hear my voice, please. Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
You? Yeah, sure. Thanks, David. Yeah, as introduced by David, I'm Jonathan Bitababaji from the National Bank of Commerce. Of course, the bank from Tanzania, as said. And we appreciate the work that the Impact Facility has done, involving us earlier and giving us a presentation, a room to present what we have as an experience from the project that we've done with FADEF. So as shown on the current slide, NBC has got, of course, a vast experience in banking industry in Tanzania, where from 1967 to date, we have more than 57 years of banking experience. And we are serving customers from different angles, of course, from retail banking, SMEs, business banking customers, and the corporate ones. So we are dealing with various sectors, and we have a very good experience supporting, of course, small customers, including small miners. Next slide, please. Okay, so looking at the bank, it has a rich history from 1967, where it was solely owned by the government. But however, in around 2000, it was the government privatized, of course, the bank, where it is now owned by three shareholders, the main being Absa Bank from South Africa, who owns the bank by 55%, and the government of Tanzania owns the bank by 30%. And you have the IFC, which is part of the World Bank, that owns the bank by 15% stake. So the ownership, you can see, is rich from local, including the government, and we have an international experience working with a large bank in Africa, which is Absa Bank from South Africa. And with that amalgamation, we have footprints in more than 12 countries in Africa, thus experiencing a lot of course, knowledge and information from different areas where we can support well our customers. Next slide, please. Okay. So as said by David earlier, we had a project under FADEF where we are supporting small miners in 3 regions of the country, where from the initiative that we have as a bank, we are looking very much, of course, to grow with customers into different sectors. And under mining, we of course we had an agreement with FADEF where we came up with a memorandum of understanding, which of course took us more than 2 years negotiating, discussing, and looking good areas where we could support the small miners. And we finally came up with a revolving fund where we wanted to support small miners in different activities that could support their mining activities from the challenges that they are currently facing. So looking at the guarantee fund that we agreed with FADEF, FADEF gave around USD 21,460, which is around 50 million T shillings. This was put aside in the bank fixed in order to guarantee any default that would be coming from the loans that bank had issued to the small miners in the 3 areas that we had selected. So NBC and FADF had agreed that from the guarantee fund that we had, should there be any default or challenges in the payments, the bank would be using 60% from the guarantee that FADF had set aside, and the bank would take the 40% risk in managing the total portfolio that we had issued out to the small miners. This was for sure a pilot project that focused on 2 regions, Geita and Shinyanga regions. We know gold is being mined in different regions in the country, but because we wanted to do a pilot project, we started with 2 regions, Geita and Shinyanga, where we've got big mining, gold minings, and we wanted to learn from that area where we could later on expand after the successfulness of the pilot project that we had with FADF. Next slide, David. Okay. Now, looking at the approach that we took with FADF, because the bank was entering in a sector where it wanted to learn more, what FADF did gave a comfort to the bank by providing training to the small miners, those that we wanted to do a pilot of lending to the guys. So FADF arranged for training for around 95 small miners, where 20 were women. And this, of course, gave us a comfort because customers were trained before on the financial management, the use of funds, and how they should be responsible in managing the day-to-day activities, of course, of the mining, and that they should be repaying the facilities. So this was the training that was done by FADF, and the bank, of course, leveraged on that training in supporting those ones who attended the training, the groups that attended the trainings. And looking at the purpose of doing that training, of course, was just to let the small miners know that the revolving funds was there to support them as working capital in their groups, but it would be available for use again after they have repaid to the bank. And the funds, the revolving funds, were given to support them in working capital, but as well to support them procuring mining equipment that they wanted, including the machineries, processing equipment, generators, of course, and looking at other processing equipment that they were using. So it was solely designed to support them in working capital and purchase of different equipments that they had from they were looking for the mining activities in their mining areas. If we can go to the next slide, David. Now, if the aim of the project, of course, was to support them have great efficiency in their production, to improve the work life of their cash flows, to improve their economy, to improve of course, to improve their marketing and the access to finance. This is the main point. And now from what went on as performance and the mechanism that we used, NBC had selected 3 groups that we had to advance funds to. The groups were selected in 2, 3. These were 3 because we said it was a pilot one. We gave them each group around 6,440, which was around 15, of course, million T shillings. And this was, of course, aimed to support their mining activities in the areas where they were doing. And the condition were very competitive. We wanted them to access these funds, which were easy first to access with the competitive interest rates. And we gave them a very flexible repayment period between 12 to 60 months. And of course, the repayment was that much peanut, looking at around 315 USD per month, something that looking at their cash flows and the mining activities, the demand of gold, of course, in the country, and the production that they were doing during the research that we did, we saw the repayment could be easy for them to of course to repay back the loans. Before issuing of the loans, we did thorough, of course, analysis of the mining activities, and there were periodical visits, field visits between FADF and the bank, where we wanted to understand where the groups are, what are the areas around them, the economic areas around them, what do they do to engage with customers, and the whole story around the mining fields where we wanted to give the funds to. So there were several engagements before, there were visits, and the training that you saw that FADF did in our previous slides that we've presented before. David, next slide. Now we provided loans to all the three groups, as we said earlier, and the loans were aimed to support them in procurement of equipment and machineries to support them in their mining activities. We had three groups, and from the slides you can see the first group, of course, bought diesel generator for electricity, and the second group, of course, had 3 logs that would support mining tools and working capital. This was the second group. And the third group, of course, had other amalgamating process equipment. They both purchased different equipment that were supporting their mining activities per se. And this was the main purpose of the facility, that to support their mining activities by procuring equipment that would support them and the working capital that would support them do their mining in an easy way and a smooth manner. However, all the 3 miners are currently in default. This is one of the changes that we've made. Of course, the aim of the facility was to support them, but they both have fallen into default. And from the research that we did, from the follow-up that our correction department did with support from FADF, we came to understand that there are some challenges that the miners are saying, the groups that we visited that are saying. They met, of course, high operational costs, that the cost of operating the minings were a bit high compared to the cash flow that they are getting from the mining activities. Unstable production resulting from diminishing income due to low ore grade. While mining, they were doing research to see the grade of ore which is allowed in every field. However, while doing the mining, some areas were not yielding as they expected. So this was one of the challenges that the groups came up with after they had fallen into default. But however, heavy rains in the regions where we advanced the funds made more mines collapse because they are using local technologies to do mining. So when the rain comes, most of the mines got challenges of collapsing, and that's stopping production for some time. And the yield that they were getting from the rain season were much lower than what was expected before. Next slide, David. So the whole process, of course, had we had expectations from this agreement with FADF, this alignment with FADF. Our expectation were to support small miners, of course, improve their mining activities, expand their markets, expand their production, isn't the way of doing mining. However, they all, as we said, have fallen into default, and we are now in recoveries. We are continuing to recover the funds that we issued to them. The challenges or the lessons learned that we've seen from this that we did to the small miners, the big one is the donor mindset. The miners have got the mindset that funds that should be extended to them should be donor kind of. Yeah, they depend a lot on external support through donor funds. They are not, looks like not that much ready to use bank finances and being responsible to repay back the funds that they have taken. Remember, the funds that we gave them was a revolving fund, expecting that they will do doing some repayments and they'll borrow again to continue servicing, of course, the mining activities. So the donor mindset is one of the changes that we've seen. That these miners are not yet ready to of course to adhere to the banking and the financial terms that need them they need them to change. We appreciate the work that FADF had done before, and of course NBC we as well chipped in and went to talk to the customers, trying to educate them and trying to inform them about the importance, of course, of adhering to the banking and the financial, of course, system, a system that could take them far. We talk to them, we inform them. If they want to grow, if they want to go further, they must come closer to the financial banks. Why? Because there is where their support is. There is where they can be trained. There is where they can be assisted to change their mindset, to build their characters, and make them good borrowers going forward. The second lesson learned was lack of debt ownership. Of course, I said in the first point that the groups had no ownership in repaying the facility. They took it as a facility, but remember, a group is made of individual miners. So the individual miners left the responsibility to the group. However, the group is a group that had brought them together. So there were no ownership from the group members in the payment of the bank facility as a team. So this is one of the lessons learned that we have learned from this partnership with FADF. But another thing that looks now from the bank side, that we as well have some areas to improve. We have challenges in understanding the mining business model and cash flows. You know, businesses, different sectors in the business have got different cash flows and different, of course, have got different cash flows, of course, dealing with. Now, mining has got its unique system, has got its unique cash flow. Now, as a bank, we have, of course, engaged the government several times, and we are still engaging the government in understanding the mining and of course the strategy that the government is trying to put, so that when we go in lending clearly to the mining sector, we have a very clear information. However, we saw again we need, of course, to partner with more of course, more experienced people or organizations or NGOs that have done much in mining, learn from them, and partner to do something that will do more better in the mining area. The second thing, we are dealing with a sector that needs specific products. So as a bank, we have a challenge to develop products that would for sure suit the small miners in the country. I know we have lent to some miners, individual miners, but these of course are traders who buy mining, and those who have invested a bit much, and they are doing very well from what we have done with them. We have lent to individual miners, and they are delivering well from the loans that they've taken from the bank. So we are continuing to develop more product, to research and develop more products that would suit even the small miners. Apart from educating them, apart from looking for maybe funds, donor funds, for guarantee funds that would cover the risks that comes from the mining, especially to the small miners. We need as well to come with a specific products that would suit the mining cash flow, mining cycle, and they understand well how this can be profitable, of course, to the country's economy and the mines themselves. What we are doing is to support miners grow, but we want to chip in providing more employment to more small miners. I know this sector employs a lot of guys, and it is coming to support in the area of employment in the other areas of the country's economy. So this is all that we have for now from NBC. We'll pause here and wait for the question that will come later as we were introduced by David earlier. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. I think there's a lot to follow up on in the Q&A at the end. Just a question to the audience. Are there any immediate questions for clarification we should address? If so, kindly raise your hand. Otherwise, mindful that I don't want to run out of time for the Q&A. I would thank you for now for the presentation. I look forward to your continued contributions during the Q&A and would love to hand it over to Vincent. Yeah. Are you able to come on with your camera and your microphone, Vincent? Vincent is joining us from Burkina Faso on behalf of Chorus Bank, where... Hi, we can hear you, perfect.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Jonathan for his presentation. I think that our presentation will be maybe similar. I don't know if Candice wants to present or introduce myself before I start with my own presentation.
Great, yes. Candice, why don't you want to introduce Vincent?
Yeah, so Vincent Konate is holds a degree in applied macroeconomics from the University of Olga, and he has extensive training in the green economy and climate change. His career spans roles such as research, roles in consultancy firms, an advisor at the Ministry of Environment, and a studies officer at the Burkina Faso Chamber of Commerce.
Excuse me, Mona, this is the translator, Rodrigo. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Would you please tell the two, well, David, I believe, and the lady who's next to him to please get a little closer to the microphone, the laptops, because we can't make out what they're saying. Or if they can use our headset microphones, it would be wonderful. Thank you.
Sorry, this should be fixed. Thanks for playing.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So Vincent now works with Chorus Bank as a green financing officer and looks at the bank's green investment portfolio. And that's one of the things that stood out for us as we engaged with the planetGOLD Burkina Faso team and Chorus Bank, and then compiled their case study, which I recommend to download from the planetGOLD website. But really excited to have you join us, Vincent. And I'll hand over to you and kindly be mindful of time and try to stay within the 15 to 20 minutes. Thanks so much and looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me well. Can you hear me?
Oui. Oui, merci.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, thanks. So I work for Chorus Bank and in charge of green financing. Chorus Bank is a group, Chorus Group, with 7 activities, branches: finance, banking, and Mizo finance, and Islamic finance. So we can, please slide. So now we are presenting 7 countries and 7 activities branches. So we work in Burkina since 2008. We started with Ivory Coast, Mali. We are now in Mali, Conakry, and different branches open over the years. So since 2023, we had the Bank Commission report. We are the 3rd rank now as a finance bank in this country, in Burkina Faso, out of the 130 other banks Slide, please. So since 2016, we are the first bank in Burkina. We contribute to the economy and in terms also of tax paid. So we have the largest network of branches, bank branches, 63 agencies, and we are present in all the regions to offer our projects to all these clients, customers, specifically in the remote area where the small miners are. A slide, please. We have different products that we offer to them. As was said before by my predecessor, by the Tanzanian representative, we have the mobile banking, allowing the clients to have an account even though they do not access to a bank agency or there is no branch locally implanted. So they have an online banking system. So we developed also activities based on the environment rules or processes. We also open an inclusive finance department to be able to reach out to the rural areas. So we want to develop this rural customers portfolio, and we can help them also face the climate change impacts. We also offer different commercial loans. Slide, please. Slide, please. We help the agriculture sector, and we also offer now the small scale mining area some new products. So small or short-term loans for 2 years for all the small miners. We have investment financing to buy some heavy equipment, some land as well, for maintenance, for the construction of their infrastructure, some warehouses and units and plants. So 2 main products of credit products. So the length of this credit is from 3 to 60 months. The interest rate is variable from 8 to 12%. And the very important aspect of that is that we do not require guarantees for these specific credit products. This is why we impose such a high interest rate. And we signed a convention, an agreement with different partners. And we are able to manage this rate of around 8 to 10%, thanks to this agreement with some guarantee agency. The agency specifically, so we have these national structures that are available in Burkina and Neri and agency. And we are now also planning on signing new agreements with other partners and financing agencies for the green projects. Please go back to the slide, the preceding slide, if you can. So we try to offer better conditions, better loan conditions to these individual customers. So our focus is on environment preservation. And since 2012, we have different line of credits and a process of accreditation of different with different partners, as you see on the list is Oxfam, Christian Aid, and other partners. We, in partnership with them, we offer different guarantees or line of credits with different volume of financing, different beneficiaries, and different sectors also that we support: agriculture, rural sectors, and this, as you can see, 2014 to 2020, and we continue to sign different conventions with our partners. We have an intervention fund for the environment. So we really focus on encouraging and developing our partners. In order to really focus on this green and environmental portfolio support, we also finance projects for the waste management sector. In 2022, more than 200,000 million CFA, so CFA francs. And we also supporting some agency for their accreditation with the Green Finance Fund. And we are trying to offer interest rates that are lower compared to the one that are offered on the market. And we have lengths limited to 5 years loan. So we have this Green Environment Fund in Burkina that we are working with in order also to facilitate some grants. We have different partnership, as I said, with the AGC and also one with planetGOLD that we started in January 2024. We organized different workshops to inform our customers about these new products, the loan offers, the interest rate, the maturity of the credit. So we are really training our partners and members, association, and the potential clients. We also work with different cooperatives, and we worked within a joint committee in order to select and identify the cooperatives that will be eligible to our grants and loans. So we started to open bank accounts, 3 for now, and 3 new ones that are under review by this committee that I just mentioned. Slide, please. So we have a very good relationship with our partners, as I said, with different lessons learned, with the cooperative organization. We we signed a different agreement. We have also a kind of a federation that is organizing these cooperatives that's called ANEMAS. And the convention or agreement that we signed really facilitates these financing processes. In Burkina, the mining sector is very highly regulated. So it is not as easy for us to really offer specific product, but we are currently working in order to, through this agency, to be able to offer and be in touch, reach out to these leaders and try to attract these cooperative in order to really progress in terms of financing conditions, in terms and conditions, transactions, production of financial documents, guarantees. And also we worked on lowering the requirements in terms of guarantees. Of course, at the bank level, the profitability is always a concern. And so we see that there are still some lack of information. And we specifically work on the guarantee aspect of our portfolio. So, as I said, we have, it is a highly regulated sector, also the banking sector. There are some delay for the opening of the accounts. There is a lot of document requirements. There is a lack of knowledge in the way of the banking products needs to be used. And again, working on the guarantee aspect that we're trying to alleviate for this customer, this specific segment. And we continue also to work in order to allow them to better know the banking sector, the banking offer in our country. And now this segment, this sector is more aware of what they can access in terms of financing. And specifically those who participate to the workshop that we organize. We also have sometimes trouble to be in touch with the leaders of the cooperatives. They're not easily reachable. We cannot always be in contact in order for them to inform their members. So we need also on the field to be able to reach out to these potential customers. And in terms of HGCM, the information is key in order to establish a trusting relationship. This is a high risk sector, as we said, which is not well known by the banking sector. And we really need to develop more action, more reach out, more sensitization action, awareness, to make them aware of what we can offer for them to support their activities. So as I could tell you that we're really focusing now on this new segment for our portfolio, beside the agricultural sector. And we want also to work on updating some legal framework. We want to activate the opening of the accounts and incentivize them to really be aware of their obligation in terms of repayment of their loans, and be aware also of all the technical aspects, let's say documentation, documents that are required for them to access financing, and be as close as possible to the bank officer or bank manager. And in Burkina, the big and large mining companies, like Canadian companies, are very profitable and do access our product. And this is in terms of incentivize or exemplify what we can do with the small and artisanal sector. And in the overall, we try to educate financially these beneficiaries, these cooperatives. So we continue our training program. We organize some common or joint review session, and we work with them with their business plan in order to also encourage them to abandon the use of mercury, in which is not as easy as we would like it to be, but within the spirit of planetGOLD and within this partnership, this is what we're trying to do. So as I said, we are currently free bank account open, but we still are facing some issues in terms of documents that are not updated. We do not have a full knowledge of these files. But planetGOLD is supporting this organization, and we are working in a partnership with planetGOLD in this field. So the cooperative are not able yet to fully use or the product that we might be offering them. So we are improving all these aspects. The main challenge is really to for these cooperatives to open and develop their members. Sometimes they have a too limited number of members, and they really need to cover and develop their affiliation with new members for us to be able to have a counterpart with which is representative of this sector. So here we have some example of the products. We also have different analysis grid or criteria. But within our mechanism, we have a fund that will be funded for 250 million CFA. And we are really trying to cover and guarantee any of this new portfolio that will come hopefully very soon. here is our process, the submission of the credit application, the documentation gathering, the information, then the review of the application by the credit committee, then the formalization of the guarantees and the opening of the credit. And we also have the Green Climate Fund. As I said at the beginning, we are supporting this organization in order to submit their application to the fund. And we try to be in touch with all these actors and continue to inform them on our effort. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Vincent. There's one or two immediate follow-up questions that maybe if you can give a very quick response to, and then there's a number of questions also to Jonathan and to you that are more generic that are better addressed at the end. But one specific question maybe for a quick response would be if you could elaborate on the composition of the committee that reviews credit applications. And the second question from Rodrigo from Honduras is whether you are focusing on groups as your clients or individuals. So if you could provide a quick response for those two, composition of the credit committee, and whether you interact with individuals or groups or both. And then we'll park the rest of the questions for the engagement after the subsequent two presentations. Sorry, Vincent, are you still with us?
Thank you for these questions. So to be able to answer, so regarding the composition of the committee in charge of reviewing the application, we have different stakeholders, the bank stakeholders, the consulting agencies, which who is reviewing the business plan with the beneficiaries. And I talked about the agency, the national agency in charge of the mining sector. So we also have members representing the government, this public agency. We also have in this committee members of the AGC that I mentioned, and also the cooperatives who are the beneficiaries. They have a federation of cooperatives, and we have a representative of this federative organization. And regarding the type of clients, customers, so far, as part of the convention with the agencies, we mainly focus on the cooperatives, so the groups, specifically for the pilot phase of our project. As I said, we work with 3 cooperatives. We opened 3 accounts. And afterwards, I think we will continue to work with this organization, this association, and through this association with their individual members. But I listened that in Tanzania, I understood that these are individual customers that are more supported But in Burkina, there is a high risk, as I said, a lot of responsibility, and we would rather deal with cooperations and pooling the efforts within these cooperatives or organizations. This is how we approach this sector.
Great. Thank you so much, Vincent, for those clarifying remarks. And there is a number of questions in the chat box, some of them specifically addressed to you, Jonathan. If you wanted to already respond to them in writing in the chat box, please feel free to. But if we get time to address them at the end, we'll try to pick up some of them. And we will dive deeper, Dr. Boateng, on questions of risk management and also product design, Louis, for what it's. But in mindful of time, I'm excited to introduce the next speaker. We have Juan Fernando joining us today from Colombia. Buenos dias. In Colombia, CFA has been working with the planetGOLD team, and Juan Fernando is their director of partnerships and has been intimately involved in these efforts. And we had the pleasure of meeting Juan already in Manila at the planetGOLD Forum and then listening to a similar presentation before. So with no further introduction, I hand over to you, and also to you a reminder to kindly keep it to 15 to 20 minutes so that we do have some time for questions at the end. Thank you so much.
Well, good morning, everyone. David, and thank you very much, and everybody else that is listening for this very important space that you've been developing around financial inclusion for small mining and subsistence mining. So a very special greeting on behalf of CFA, Financial Cooperative, and with planetGOLD, Colombia, and the UNDP group. And thanks to them, this cooperative have been taking very important steps in being able to facilitate financial solid inclusion for this very important sector in the country. So please, David, please tell me if everybody can hear me okay? Yes?
Yes, loud and clear.
Sí, perfectamente. Great, okay, wonderful. Okay, so then, in that regard, there is an important notion that within the exercise that CFA Cooperativa Financiera has been doing, there has three key elements at the moment of being able to access or better facilitate access both to savings accounts as well as to different facilities in order to be able to improve the productivity of the AGSM and to eradicate mercury use through the use of new technologies and techniques. And so that, I'm sorry, somebody's speaking at the same time. I'm sorry, I'm hearing somebody has their microphone open.
1 second, we'll fix it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so thank you to UNDP and planetGOLD and their chapter in Colombia, and also to the Ministry of Mines and Energy. This cooperative took about a year of actually living with the mining ecosystems. And so that's one of the key elements at the moment of facilitating access and inclusion for this type of public. So this is how we adjusted everything that has to do with procedural manuals for the due diligence and the liaisons with the artisan miner. So internally in our cooperative, we have to follow certain procedures that are adjusted to each one of the realities of the different exploitation typology of the minerals. So we know now can liaise the artisanal or subsistence miner that does not use any type of equipment for their exploitation. That's first thing. We also have some mechanisms for the various exploitation modalities. whether for the actual miner or who has an operation contract or has even an operation or formalization subcontract for association partnerships that are joined in the facilitation of the exploitation of the mineral and also for the marketer. So this was the first thing that we did was to adjust our processes and procedural manual so that they can be in agreement with the needs and requisites and alternative of exploitation, formally that is, for the material in Colombia. So within this knowledge process, the mining client, we've identified that one of the elements for mining not to be able to uh, be left aside, or rather could access, was that the ASGM could not access, of course, financial services. So this cooperative that is in mining territories overcame that roadblock, and now they can facilitate miners to have accounts to receive payment for their commercialization of their mineral and have an adequate traceability of exploitation and marketing of their gold. That was one of the main mandates. But we also keep in mind the revenue of gold to be able to maybe go into investments in the modernization in extracting material. So that is fundamental first. And the adaptation of other procedures to be able to address these clients through savings accounts for their commercialization and granting credit for updating their machinery where there is no mercury used for extracting this.
So the second key element is to have an element that could ease the granting of credits. And so with the help of planetGOLD Colombia, surrounding this cooperative, we were able to develop a fund for support or for guarantees that in one way or another were able to generate trust and confidence in the granting of credits. Currently, the presentations from the previous speakers mentioned the risk as the key factor for this activity. And so the second form of mitigating that risk was to have an instrument that could ensure a warranty. That is to offer the cooperative further elements that could then facilitate access and financial inclusion for this segment of the public. So after that, we started granting those credits. With this, today, we have a product that still endures, even though the planetGOLD Colombia project instrument is reaching its end goal, but it will remain a sustainable element throughout time in order to continue to serve other such miners. This is how we've managed to offer 50 different credits during the stage. Today, we're starting a second affiliation segment, and it's much like the ones that we've done thus far. Likewise, we've also mobilized close to $285,000 granted in order to improve machinery, but also to modernize the extraction equipment, as well as the equipment, the implementation of equipment that could replace the use of mercury in mining exploitation. This means that facilitating financial inclusion financial access to this population is also a significant contribution for environmental services through the non-use of mercury in mining activities. We also granted close to $10,000, almost $11,000 actually, for subsistent mining projects. In subsistence mining, we find something that is very particular. That is the fact that this mining does not require a lot of machinery. It does not require too much technology to extract, but it did identify that these miners are not 100% dedicated to mining activities, and therefore have some additional secondary activities or complementary activities for the development of the activity, especially agricultural activities. Now, this second source of income allows for daily sustenance and excellent trading opportunities, as well as the additional income. So in those cases, we granted these particular credits for the sowing of specific crops, such as cassava, grain plantain, coffee, and other such crops that are popular in the area. Also, as part of the contribution to other trading activities, we granted funds for the growing of products and the supporting of different entrepreneurship projects that were greatly instrumental. So, yes, a lot of them were accepted. And finally, to ask, how can we manage to increase access through the use of this warranty fund that we built together with other miners? Very well. And so this mechanism that we managed to include within the co-op, First, since this
Sorry. Sorry, we've lost translation.
Sí, yeah.
And so we released the payments because the good habits that they've started to develop. Well, you see that this Eternit grant is also due to the contribution of other stakeholders. This is why it's behaving well as a rotational fund, the measure in which small miners start paying, and they start allowing for more space so that other people who do not have a similar warranty could actually make use of the same. And in this way, ensure access to credit. Something also very, very important is that this is a hidden synergy. In many ways, they don't really know that they have this tool available to them. They just continue to develop significant payment behaviors and habits. There's something that was significant, a significant breakthrough with planetGOLD Colombia. That is the financial inclusion strategy. Before subsistence miners, before they could even open their account and get their credits, they actually participated in the completion of a financial education course to facilitate that process. And as I was mentioning before, this also allows them access to technologies that further allow them to replace the use of mercury. This was an important feature as well as a significant commitment that they've achieved today. This applies to small scale artisanal miners and subsistence miners. And those who can access this benefit have that requirement to not use mercury as part of their processes. So we're continuing to service these small miners and subsistence miners. And indeed, some new programs are being developed in order to increase the pool, increase the fund, and reach more and more subsistence miners following the same model and the same mechanism. So we have the twofold enemies here, the twofold elements here. Knowledge of the client, development of the cooperatives, and also an element that allows us to cover some percentage of the guarantee for those who don't have that instrument available. Another mechanism that we use very often in financial inclusion was the use of rotational funds. Thanks to planetGOLD Colombia, this beautiful program, we have been able to develop a entrepreneur development project that is aimed at women, because the women are especially important in this mining projects. So through creativity, through cooperation, solidarity coming from women's collectives, we've managed to procure funds for them so that they can also work within the organization and streamline the process of obtaining bank accounts and obtain microcredits to finance their productive activities. And likewise, to strengthen their entrepreneurship projects. This one was specifically aimed at subsistence and small-scale artisanal mining projects. We managed to mobilize close to $9,000, and in every organization, we managed to allocate a fund of $2,600, so that through self-financing and self-governance strategies, they could implement such mechanisms within the organization. That was important to mention, and we also want to thank planetGOLD for this second mechanism for self-management that allowed women to have instruments for financial inclusion. Likewise, we also see that the Women's Network becomes a significant tool in order to generate better conditions in regards to the work of mining. So one of the greater challenges that women have today are definitely these, and through this networking methodology as a business entrepreneur development model, we look for the promotion of individual, social, interrelational skills in order to improve quality of life. We managed to build 20 different nodes of women. By nodes, we mean groups or collectives of women, groups of 20 to 25 women, in order to improve their quality of life, to improve their incomes, their autonomy, as well as their empowerment. It starts with financial inclusion, financial education, and productive entrepreneurial projects. And a very important element, which was formalization in order to trade the gold in proper conditions and ensuring traceability for these materials. So 321 women today are still participating in this network, in which they are sharing knowledge and gaining access to local benefits. And they use this rotational fund as a significant tool to achieve financial inclusion. So we believe that the great achievement with this financial development and with this planetGOLD Colombia project is that we have some real installed capacity so that we can continue to bank on this project in smaller scale artisanal mining and subsistence mining, making it so that these mining companies can make payments to their suppliers, to their employees through these accounts, while always ensuring traceability for gold trading. But of course, also having access to credits and microcredits for the implementation of new technologies that allow us to modernize their equipment, increase their productivity, and not use fish. So also mitigating the risk of loss in this way. We also have the gender component and the support for women who are part of small-scale subsistence mining. This is what we will continue to do. Thank you very much, planetGOLD Colombia. And we want to become a stock component in Colombia. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Juan Fernando. There is one brief follow-up question in the chat box already that inquired about the guarantee that was provided. Am I correct that it was about $66,000 that were provided as a guarantee for the total amount of funding that you were providing? So it would be about 20%. Does that sound about right? Great.
Yes, that is correct.
I'm sure there will be more questions after, but to make sure we have time for questions, I invite David McInboy to join us and take over to reflect a bit on Trust Merchant Bank's approach to financial inclusion in the ASGM sector. David is part of the management office of TMB, a Congolese financial inclusion bank with focus on a lot of the remote communities in the country, and a bank that was recently acquired by KCB, Kenya Commercial Bank, with branches across East Africa. And David has been spearheading efforts to develop the tools and mechanisms that make it possible for them to engage with the artisanal mining sector at large, initially in gold and now also in other commodities. David, it's a huge pleasure to have you present. Kindly try to keep your presentation to 20 minutes so that we have at least 10 minutes for questions at the end. And if participants on the call have a few minutes longer, the Q&A might run over, but please take it away.
Sure thing. Thanks, David. And thank you to the organizers for the opportunity today to talk a little bit about TMB and our work in the ASM and the ASGM space. Apologies, I have a slight cold, so if at times I splutter or take a break, apologies for that in advance. TMB is a commercial bank. We're a private bank operating in the DRC, and aside from a rep office in Brussels, we operate only in the DRC. We are home to about 1 in 5, 1 in 4 bank accounts in the Congo. That equates to about 2 million clients right across the DRC in all areas of the country, including very remote parts of the country. We're a universal bank with a general historic focus more on retail and small business banking, what we would call MSME or SME banking. Our balance sheet is about $2 billion US. Next slide, please. So from the outset, our mission was to be Congo's universal bank, very much focused on financial inclusion. We recognize that in DRC, the ASM sector is a significant sector. It employs probably close to 1 million people directly engaged in ASM. So if we are to achieve our mission, we need a response from the bank to providing banking to ASM. We also view ASM as an opportunity to grow revenues, to diversify our operations. And out of that, the bank decided about 4 or 5 years ago to develop a financial inclusion strategy, and out of that strategy to develop a financial inclusion unit itself. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about TMB. and how we approached ASM and ASGM, but I'm also going to step back a little bit and talk a little bit about commercial banks and how they think. And now I know there's a lot of generalization here, but it might be useful just to run through the thought process and the decision makers at commercial banks. So whenever a commercial bank looks at a new business, and that would be ASM in most jurisdictions, there's a decision-making process which maps the strategy and the growth opportunities alongside the risk and the resource allocation that a new business would require. And in an area like ASM, there's significant resource allocation requirements, and that's because banks are very unfamiliar with the sector. Banks will look at existing strengths, and that could, can we go back, previous slide, please? So you're looking at your strengths. Do you have the capacity, the right people in the right parts of the country to respond to an opportunity? What does the legal and regulatory system in the country look like? And are other banks operating in the sector, or have you got a potential first mover advantage? And that's a really, really key thing when you're looking to engage with a bank. Next slide, please. There are a lot of decision makers involved when a bank like TMB seeks to expand its operations into a new business area. And the ones on your screen right now, I call them the veto, those with a veto. At the very, very top of the board of directors who will be extremely risk averse, but you require board approval to invest or to engage in a new sector. And they will look at detail in any proposition to expand into what would be considered a high risk jurisdiction or a high risk business area. Now, boards will meet monthly to once a quarter, it depends on the bank, and to get a paper onto a board, and this is important if you're designing or you're implementing a program, to get a paper onto a board to consider a new business, you need at least 3 months notice. And the board agenda is busy in the schedule, and a new business will be deprioritized against existing business. So the earliest from the first interaction with a bank that a business proposition for, say, ASM would reach the board is minimum 3 months. You have the executive management. The key players would be the CFO and the CEO in terms of if the board gives approval, how does the bank actually implement a strategy for a new business area? Risk, finance, compliance, and legal all have their own areas of expertise and will opine on the opportunity, the risk, the costs. Finance in particular will look at, is this profitable? Compliance and legal, is this legal? Or are the hurdles to interacting with the sector too great, or are they manageable? Next slide, please. You have a host of other teams, business development, IT, the commercial teams, the product development, and the ops teams who will also be asked for their opinion on engaging with the ASM sector. And I really just kind of highlight this because it gives you an idea of the depth of the conversation within a bank and the time it requires for a bank to make a decision to actually progress into a new business area. I would say 6 to 12 months is not unusual for these conversations to complete in any commercial bank. Next slide, please. And the next one. So again, if you're engaging or if you're looking to engage with a bank, if you're designing a program, you need to know your domestic banking sector. You need to target a bank or banks and those decision-making bodies within the bank that can actually affect change and convince a bank to engage with the ASM sector. You need to present a well-rounded argument that talks about the risks and to the potential benefits. And oftentimes it's the latter that is ignored. You have to sell the opportunity. And in that regard, I would always say sell ASM, but at TMB2, we're also cognizant that ASM activity it happens within the community where there are other opportunities for a bank too, other economic activity, formal or not, but there is additional growth opportunities. So if possible, don't limit your conversations solely to ASMs, make banks aware of the communities in which ASM activity takes part. If possible, also share risk management strategies and approaches. It can be costly to develop those for banks and very, very time consuming. So if they exist already, make it available to a bank or at least point them in the right direction. Avoid complexity, and I'll come back to that later on, but for a bank, really, ASM, ASGM, you don't want to get too granular. The moment you start talking about ASGM, you're really refining the conversation. Many of the risks and opportunities that speak to ASM or ASGM apply right across the ASM world. So my view would be go a little bit higher, talk about ASM, ASGM is naturally part of that. and engage as soon as possible. I talked you through the decision-making process, so you really need to engage as early as possible with a bank. If you've got a 2 or 3 year program, you need to start on really on day one, but also have a concrete proposal worked out and not a hypothetical. You can't go to a board of directors with a hypothetical. Know your market and be aware too that retail banking is very, very low margin and very, very high cost. And this is a universal problem and exists right across the world, including in advanced economies. And that means for a operation or a new business to be sustainable, and it has to be scalable. Where you have a low margin business, you have to do lots of business and lots of activity and make a small margin in order for that to be profitable and sustainable into the future. And a little bit more about your target bank. Understand what their areas of risk, the risk appetite, the growth areas, and in particular ESG, what the position on ESG is, because there is sometimes hooks that you can interact with the bank on the ESG area and how that can make ASM more interesting to a commercial bank. Next slide, please. Potential is really important. So sell the opportunity too. Banks will look at ASM as high risk, but high risk means that often that sector is unbanked, which provides a first mover advantage to a bank to grow its market share and diversify its revenue streams. And banks like to be a first mover oftentimes. So high risk, yes, but it is also an opportunity to be the first to engage. And typically, and you see this in sectors right around the world, what is a high-risk client today can, in time, evolve to be a low risk because the relationship is developed between the bank and the client or the sector. The bank builds data, and through that process, the risk profile of the client or clients or the sector reduces over time. And hopefully, with a really rigid and rigorous approach, you develop a a partnership with that sector. That means that in time, the risk profile reduces of the sector and the bank can provide even more products at a lower price. Holistic growth is really important too. Capacity building is not siloed. So as a bank engages with a sector like ASM for the first time, it develops risk, it develops compliance and legal tools to engage with ASM. But the risks in ASM are somewhat similar to risks in other sectors. And there are spillover effects. So an approach that's designed for ASM can often be applied to other sectors, for example, agriculture or forestry. And it's important to make banks aware of that if they're not already aware. Their investment in ASM is not just siloed to ASM. There is opportunity there. And next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit about ESG. A lot of banks have ESG programs, and those programs include specific goals. If you take the KCB group, there is the group has over 100 targets in the area of ESG. Now, specific, if I give you an example how this can speak to ASM, is that a bank might have certain environmental support initiatives or a requirement to implement environmental support initiatives. So if you look at Mercury in ASGM, it could be that the requirement to reduce mercury usage or eliminate could map into an ESG goal or program of a bank. So it's important to research and talk to banks about their ESG programs and see if there is collaboration and some synergies there. That means that if you look at specifically Mercury, it takes the conversation solely out of a kind of a profit-making transaction into a split between an ESG transaction where the bank might co-fund and a private for-profit transaction. Strategic partnerships and collaborations are important. In particular, I would say for a little bit of hand-holding and speak also to the CSO on reputational benefits that a bank might gain from engaging with the ASM sector. There's a lot of negative media coverage out there. It's important, I think, to change that and turn it around. There are, of course, risks engaging with the sector. Hand-holding is really, really important. Banks need to ensure that they can speak to their stakeholders about what they're doing and why I'm doing, present a positive message. Really, really important concept is that let's not focus on access to finance first. You have to develop a relationship with the client first. That's certainly our approach. Access to a bank account first, build a relationship, build the data, and then lend. And TMB will not lend to a new client or a new sector or a new part of the country where we're operating for at least 6 months after setting up business in that area. We need to understand the local market, the players. Oftentimes there are no formal data. It takes time to build that. Generally, internationally, where you see banks quickly move into a sector and start lending on day one, you get mispricing and you get very high default rates. And that's across the board in every economy and every sector. Next slide, please. And the next one. So key to TMB's interaction with ASM has been a PPA access to finance pilot some years ago. And that really allowed us to develop our confidence to engage with the ASM. Next slide. And it really gave us confidence in terms of how we can manage compliance and reputational risks. And they were the key barriers for us. The barrier wasn't economics, it was compliance and reputation. And any sector in the DRC will transact in dollars, a dollarized economy. So when we engage with that, we have stakeholders outside of the DRC in the Eurozone and the dollar market. So we have to be answerable to those correspondent banks and international regulators in terms of how we do business. If we get it wrong, the risks are really, really significant for the bank. Now, another message, and I think we knew it already within TMB, is that we've done it before as a financial inclusion bank operating right across the DRC, including in high-risk areas. ASM presents unique problems, but there are a lot of them are shared with other sectors, and that is something that oftentimes isn't understood or isn't communicated. And you'll oftentimes find banks providing service to other high-risk sectors, like I mentioned, agriculture, and not thinking, actually, ASM isn't that different. We've done it before, we can do it again, and that's been a key message within TMB. Next slide, please. Our vision is to provide, and we are, a service to all types of actors in the ASM sector, from individual miners up to exporters, in all commodity sectors and right across the DRC, including high-risk parts of the country in the northeast of DRC, where most of the gold activity is. Next slide. The risk-reward balance is really, really important to understanding how banks think. Developing solutions can be very expensive. You have to look at the return that banks can earn on investing in developing those solutions. And that really speaks to the sustainability and the scalability of any project or any sector that you're looking at. Small sectors are not scalable, and you will never have, I think, a private sector bank responding in a sustainable, scalable way if they can't make the returns over the medium to longer term. Next slide, please. So at TMB, how do we manage the risk? We've developed a risk rating system specific for ASM activity. It's something that is universally understood within the banking sector because it maps very clearly to other risk systems and frameworks that banks would use for other sectors internationally, complies with DRC law and regulation, and it speaks into OECD and other requirements internationally too. Next slide, please. And through that program, we use multiple different data sources to develop a compliance and reputational risk profile of a client. Next slide, please. There are two parts to it. We risk rate an entity or an individual, and we have an onboarding requirement, so there's a minimum threshold. And if that threshold is achieved, then the client can have a bank account with TMB. There's an accessibility one too. So the better the risk rating, the more products the individual or entity can access. And also in time, we hope that we can evolve the pricing so that as, in particular in the ESG world, as standards and performance increases, we can reduce the pricing to the client on any loans that they may receive from TMB. Next slide, please. As I said, we risk rate all our clients. So you will see here, this is the risk rating scale. And according to the risk rating, a client can access different products and different tenors of products. Next slide, please. With the requirement as a high-risk entity to be reviewed annually. That's the current process. As our population, as that data builds up, we'll be able to hopefully reduce that requirement in time. Next slide, please. This is an example for a gold cooperative, and you can see the level of data behind this, or over 400 data points that inform this scorecard that you can see. We're looking at various different elements, everything from the legal framework to transparency, taxation, extortion, supply chain integrity, presence of child labor, modern slavery, etc. All of this is risk rated. If there are any red flags, that's an automatic default. We will not onboard that client, or we will close that client's account. And then the scoring, as the scoring improves, the access for that client improves, and ideally the pricing for that product will also improve for the client. It's a very time-consuming process, and that speaks again to the requirement to be able to scale this in time in order to be able to achieve a return on that investment. We take a very customer-centric approach to products and services. We don't like the idea of inventing new products and services for a specific client type, and the reason is that increases costs and complexity. There's an internal market within the bank, and different entities and departments will be fighting for resources. So the more complexity and cost you have, the less likely that you're going to achieve a resource allocation. So what we know is that clients, ASGM clients, they want to borrow money. Okay, that's an overdraft or a term loan. And we fine tune our standard product according to the individual client, not to the sector, but the client. We know there's volatility in earnings. We know that there's differences in availability of collateral or not, that the local economies where the entity engages differ. So the financial product will be amended or structured in a way that speaks specifically to that individual borrower. That requires quite a significant engagement between our credit risk team and the borrower themselves. But this is an approach that we apply right across the bank, throughout the OC and every sector. Next slide, please. And the next one. So as I said, we're all sectors, from miners up to cooperatives and exporters. We have a strong emphasis on Peple Mobile, our mobile banking product. That brings down the cost of introducing banking services to any sector, including ASGM. It also comes with quite powerful compliance and money laundering software in the background that can monitor all transactions, which obviously, again, provides confidence to both the bank and to our stakeholders nationally and internationally. Next slide, please. We've got 39 ASM clients. So this is ignoring miners, but actually entities. 15 are partially or wholly involved in the gold sector. We've got 4 loans or lease products. Leasing is interesting because the product the asset remains somewhat owned by the bank, and that reduces collateral requirements. We have 43 prospective ASM clients right now who are being risk assessed. 9 of them are within the gold sector. And I'll wrap it up there. I think, David, on 20 minutes and 10 seconds.
That was very rich in information, and thanks for doing this despite your cold. And amazing to have that on record as well, as well as the other presentations. If I could ask the speakers that were presenting today to come maybe on camera and to launch the Q&A, for which we still have 15 minutes. Vincent sent his apologies that he needed to drop off. He was only able to join for the first hour of today's discussion. But Jonathan and Juan Fernando, if you're still there, please do join us back. We've thought about a couple of questions to guide a discussion, but obviously there's a lot of input in the chat box, which we'll also want to draw on, and Kenneth is going to take a minute to go through those questions and pick some to be integrated. One question that stood out, and we've heard different perspectives on that, was around, do the products need to be different if we want to invest into ASM than into agriculture or else? And we've just heard from David, TMB's position that rather than think about a sector-specific solution, they're trying to tailor something to the client that they're engaging with. But if I could open with this to both of you, a brief reflection on, as you think about investing further or reassessing the learnings, Jonathan, from your currently defaulted investments, where do you think does ASGM and ASM warrant different terms? And can you elaborate on in how far they should be different? What makes ASGM different from other SMEs that you invest in? or provide services to.
Yeah, sure. So thanks, David. And I think looking at the general SMEs, they do their businesses in different business sectors that, of course, might have or they have very structured operations. The cycles, they are very global. And when we need to come to structured finance, it's on very specific few products that we need to service the needs from customers, SME customers. But looking at the small miners, you look on the business that is, for instance, from the experience that you have with FAREF, the projections are a bit tricky. Why? Because we had reports before lending that was done by, of course, FAREF and the technical parts that were involved in doing the research, that the areas where these small miners are going to do mining is rich of minerals, and it will yield this certain results. But in return, we got a challenge later while repaying. Of course, doing repayment, that the areas were not yielding what were expected before. So this is a bit tricky. Why? Because we depend on other experts to come up with research results that gives us an assurance of funds that we issue out to small miners that would yield back and of course repay the loans and continue to circulate in the economy. So it's a bit tricky dealing with small miners, and we think we need for sure like structured finance, where we would have maybe a value chain kind of financing, where we need to look at the small miners, the markets that where they sell their final products, and we structure the finance that would suit the value chain. This is what I'm looking. And if we would go to asset finance, we need to be looking maybe paying directly to the suppliers of the equipment that are used by small miners in their operations, in their mining activities. This is what I would think around it. This is how I could differentiate between the small miners and the normal SMEs in the economic environment. David.
Thanks, Jonathan. Juan Fernando, do you have anything to add from your side in terms of what adjustments did you make, or maybe are you going to make to your products to continue to serve the sector as well as possible?
Yes, well, thank you very much for that. Yes, as a matter of fact, one of the biggest learnings that we have been able to have is that the financial products have to be in agreement with the needs of the actual miners, of course, and the companies that form part of it. And those needs are done in terms of the destination that the investment will have. So we found that there are some mining companies in Colombia that require short-term capitals for their immediate needs. And there are some investments that require credits that are required for long-term investment. Investment are not immediate. And likewise, in this relationship that we've had in these last few times, we've been able to identify the needs of developing the important products. The first one is a credit product to be able to finance the formalization stage. Now, today, a miner in Colombia, in order to process what has to do with licenses and PTOs or work things and environmental licenses, etc. These are very high cost, and they require to be financed. And the co-op didn't have that product now, and we're already identifying that it's necessary to identify a product for this formalization stage, but it's also necessary to develop a product with what has to do with the closure, the mine closure process, and especially the process of rehabilitation or restoration of those areas that have been worked on, because that's where they require to do environmental investments that we didn't have credit product or accompaniment so that once the mine is shut down, then they would actually restore the area of the environment and leave that area in adequate conditions. So the mining companies are identifying a very important need for financing the state. And I think these are the results from what we're learning. And so this way we will continue strengthening all of the issues to be able to mitigate risk and to provide financial inclusion for the ASME. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks.
ASGM, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And another question that came from our chat box was around informal financing terms compared to formal financing terms. And David, maybe you can reflect on that, whether you've done market research or as you investigated the opportunity that you've outlined very well in terms of numbers. Do you have any reflections on how a loan, once they're able to access loan financing, might relate to what they're currently relying on if they're able to access financing informally?
So sorry, David, the line went down a bit. That's on pricing and the pricing of a loan portfolio product through the fund. Yeah. So everybody focuses on pricing, and it is important. I know in DRC, informal loans can price very competitively, so substantially lower than what a bank would provide. But there are strings attached in terms of the off-taker, then, or the source of that financing and the price that the individual miner or cooperative would achieve for the product. So there's a little bit of, I guess, financial literacy required in order that people are doing a like-for-like comparison, where an informal lender is lending. But oftentimes, too, informal lenders will lend at 30% on the dollar in a month, which is substantially more than the bank would, too. So there are different considerations. But one, you need to look at where we say the informal lender is competitive on the pricing. You have to look at the whole pricing ecosystem. Yeah. So what you're getting the lending for X, but what are you losing on the sale price for your product? But there are a couple of other things too. What's really important too is tenor of lending and security of lending. So tenor is how long can you lend for? And generally banks can lend longer than informal lenders. And that can be important for CapEx if a cooperative or a miner wishes to invest for CapEx purposes. And the other thing is security of contract. So typically with a loan, if you adhere to the loan conditions, your loan will run the 24, 36, 48 months according to the contract as it is. With informal lenders, you often see a pattern whereby the lender has a financial squeeze, liquidity squeeze. They need access to their cash. And sometimes in Congo, with the threat of violence, they come to the borrowers and require a request that the funds are returned, i.e. the loan is paid off. You don't get that with obviously with a bank. I should hope not. Certainly not with TMB. So there are three things: the pricing, the tenor, and actually the security of the contract itself.
Great. I'll pose the next question, but if either Jonathan or Fernando, you want to add more on the previous point, please do. But there was a question in the chat box from Dr. Boateng and also something that we've anticipated as a area of interest that's around de-risking. And both in Tanzania and in Colombia, the examples relied on or leveraged at least guarantee funds, and the same with Chorus Bank in Burkina Faso. Trust Merchant Bank is banking without a current guarantee. I'm not sure whether that's categorical exclusion or just the status quo, but maybe you want to reflect on the importance of guarantees historically for you to get the go-ahead to engage with the sector, and also looking into the future, whether there's a reliance on guarantees or whether you think you will be able to do this fully commercially. And yeah, eager to hear any of your thoughts.
Yeah, David, can I jump in on that one? Because we have quite a few strong opinions on this. The moment you have risk sharing, you distort the market, and you distort the market in terms of the borrower, and you distort the market in terms of the bank's behavior. So you have to be very, very careful of how you design a risk sharing product to reduce the distortion. And you can reduce the distortion to a manageable level. So let me give you an example. the borrower, and I think it was Jonathan spoke earlier about the donor mindset. So the borrower is less likely, and there are a lot of data on this. And again, it's global in every sector, where a borrower understands that as a form of risk sharing, their adherence to the terms and conditions of the loan drops substantially, and that's globally observed. So in designing a program, it's probably best that borrowers do not know or not aware that there's a risk sharing facility in the background. But also, I would say the same to the bank, at least to the operations teams within a bank, because also globally observed, the data aren't as strong, but the signals are there that where you get risk sharing, banks make worse lending decisions because they know that not 100% of their equity is at risk. So what you tend to find is credit officers will make less robust credit decisions. They'll lend where they wouldn't do without risk sharing. And new business teams will seek to acquire clients that are not perhaps attractive lending proposals as they would otherwise. So its second point when you're designing a program to reduce these distortions, our view would be that only a very senior level in a bank is aware of the program, and that everybody else is unaware of the program. You can design a program that allows a bank engage with a sector that in particular is not scalable. So by itself, it will never be a profitable endeavor. But with a risk-sharing product, it might be, but be very, very careful how you communicate the existence of that risk-sharing facility. So that would be our view.
Thanks. Really valuable to hear that. Happy to hear your thoughts, Jonathan, and Juan Fernando as well, or a response to that. Before you do, just for the people that might drop off in 2 minutes, it looks like we might run over by 5 to 10 minutes maybe. But we've put in the chat box, we've put a link to a feedback survey. Wouldn't take more than 5 minutes for you to fill that in, and would help us immensely to evaluate what to do next with this series. So kindly open the link in your language and fill that in. If you do it immediately, you don't have to worry about it later. But Juan Fernando and Jonathan, is there anything you want to respond to David or echo or contradict?
I'd like to complement that regarding the guarantee funds that are created. They're not the only alternative so that we can facilitate access and financial inclusion for the ASGM. I think this is a boost and a way of sharing risk with various stakeholders that are interested in helping ASGM sector. But of course, if we wouldn't have these funds, then we as a financial institution have to seek for alternatives in order to guarantee access to financial inclusion for this population. CFA Financial Cooperative in Colombia is seeking how to accept guarantees that can also be offered by the miners because there are mining companies that have loans, that have different machinery, equipment, vehicles that could also serve as collateral and risk and support when they're granted credit. So therefore, these complementary guarantees are just one mechanism that helps boost and generates trust, but at the same time should not become an ongoing instrument to do that and to continue getting these facilities. I think what these mechanisms helped us to is to better know the client and to create a repayment philosophy and that they can offer their own guarantees. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks for that. Jonathan, any thoughts from your side?
Yeah, for sure. I just want to compliment what David and John Fernando have just said regarding the general, of course, guarantee schemes. However, of course, looking at the approach that we are doing as a bank, we have several other guarantee schemes that we are doing with the other sectors, and they are doing much better. The approach that we took, what David said, we are not making it known to the borrowers that there is a guarantee that is carrying the risk of certain percent to what they have taken from the bank. We just lend to them as if they are covering the risks fully from what they have done. So this is the right approach I would just suggest and would complement. And looking at the experience we had with FAREF, I think this was asked by Robert. The mindset that we said that customers have regarding donor funds, this came during correction and recoveries of the funds that after customers are defaulted. Why? Because all the three groups that when we are talking to them about collecting and paying the bank funds, they all talk about the guarantee that they have with FAREF. Why don't you take the 6% from FAREF if you see things are not going well with us? Then the rest will be recovered from maybe little amount, or you can do any other thing that can support. So it's something that we guarantees are very much needed. And we are doing it with the other sectors in agriculture and other areas. We do have very good guarantee schemes and they're operating very well. The only thing is customers should not know about the guarantees that they are getting from maybe from different funds that they're having. But the good thing with guarantees, I would say, is that they help financial banks or commercial banks go into sectors where we would have not gone by ourselves. So by having a combined experience and expertise from guarantee funds, we join force together and enter into sectors of the economy that we need to boost and see good results from that area. So we recommend, but we need the right approach to use the guarantee scheme to operate better.
I've got one last question, and after that, we'll close. And a big thank you to everybody attending, and a huge thank you to our presenters for sharing their insights. But the last question is about timescale. And ironically, we've run over time, but it takes months to understand the sector, years to pilot and engage, and you've been at this for a very long time, and you might not yet be profitable with your engagements, or maybe about to break even. So, and for TMB, David says that they started in 2020, and they have now about 50 clients onboarded, a handful of which have received access to financial products. So I'd love to hear your reflections on what timescale should be communicated when engaging with the sector. It seems to require very long breath in order to make this work. And a lot of the NGO projects in this sector have a limited runtime of maybe 12 months or 18 months, 2 years. But I'd love to hear your thoughts as a concluding remark, and anything else you wanted to add to close off on how you think about it in terms of long-term investment into accessing this sector. And maybe David, because I know that you have thoughts on this, you can kick off.
Yeah, sure. It's taken us years to develop a strategy and an approach. The sector suffers from a significant lack of data, and data are really important for any bank to price risk. So it's taken us a long time to develop a solution. And generally, our view is that it takes 5 years. That's 5 years to develop a sustainable business for the ASM sector, i.e. we won't be profitable in the first 5 years. But we have the shareholder support to take that medium-term approach. And that's acceptable to us because we think over the long term in the DRC, where you have 1 million actors and the broader communities, there is scale available to us. So 5 years to reach profitability, but with the ability to not reach 1 million entities or miners, but a significant proportion of that within, say, 10 years. I hope that answers the question from our side.
Yes. If Juan Fernando and Jonathan, if you want to make final remarks, our interpreters need to drop off soon, so kindly keep it brief, but final words from both of you.
Okay. I think David said it very well, that developing a product in this sector would require a lot of time for sure to do. However, looking at the country like Tanzania, we've had several discussions with the government, several research, and we are getting some data that are helping to develop the sector. We are not yet there, but I think we still need some good time to come up with very specific support that the commercial banks.
Okay, we've lost Jonathan, but with this, a big thank you to everybody attending and for to planetGOLD for allowing us to facilitate and host this session. If you're interested in joining the next session, please reach out to Candice and let us know. But it was great to hear from everybody today, and please get in touch if you'd like to work with us more on this topic and join potential future exchanges around financial inclusion. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, David and Candice. We appreciate.
Thank you.